Yet another battleground emerges in Libya. Anti-Gaddafi forces claim control of the strategic town of Lafranouf. But forces loyal to Colonel Gaddafi claim they're back in control of AlJazeera. Hello and welcome. This is AlJazeera live from Doha. I'm Divi Gopalan. Also ahead, evidence of the ongoing crackdown in Côte d'Ivoire, but will the international community intervene? Demonstrators in Egypt's second biggest city claim officials are destroying sensitive documents. China acknowledges it's time to change, setting out reforms in an annual address to the nation. It's more than 2 weeks since anti-Gaddafi protesters called time on their leader of more than 40 years. But officially, he's still the country's ruler. On Friday, Muammar Gaddafi appointed a new ambassador to the UN, while forces loyal to him are stepping up their attacks to regain lost territory. Gaddafi's troops have attacked areas in and around the opposition-held city of AlJazeera, just west of Tripoli. Reports say at least 30 people have died, but the area remains under rebel control. In the capital, Tripoli, tear gas and rubber bullets were used to break up an anti-Gaddafi protest after Friday prayers. But later, the colonel's loyalists held a rally in the city. And reports say his regime is getting some support from its African neighbors. Libyan state TV says the presidents of Mali and Guinea called Gaddafi to give him their backing. To the east, in opposition-held Benghazi, there was an explosion at an arms dump. At least a dozen people were killed. But there are reports that Gaddafi's opponents have taken control of Ras Lanouf, a key oil port. This after they confronted forces loyal to the Libyan leader. And these pictures were taken before that clash, and they appear to show the rebels on their way to the city. Our correspondent Anita McNaught is in the capital, Tripoli, and has been allowed limited access to the Libyan government to send this update.
Well, we travelled for more than an hour through the streets of Tripoli today after Friday prayers, when we were aware there were plans to stage some kind of a protest. But Tripoli itself, a city almost completely locked down, electronic communications cut off for the previous 24 hours, shops shut, practically no people on the street, and a very, very heavy security presence, police and army at major intersections near the two areas we wanted to see, Soukhjouma and Tajoura. Now, fellow journalists actually were there when there was an attempt at a protest in both those places, but both times the security presence was so heavy that if anyone appeared who looked like they were a protester, they were immediately outnumbered and surrounded. Further to the east of the city, in the area of Zawiya, where there has been a rebel holdout against the Libyan government said this afternoon that they had retaken that area, then qualified it by saying there were still pockets of fighting, but isolated, and we understand that fighting has continued into the evening.
Well, the situation in Libya's east is developing into a tense standoff between pro and anti-government forces. But as AlJazeera's Jackie Rowland reports, Gaddafi's troops are fighting back.
The situation now in the east of the country is really a stalemate, with anti-Gaddafi forces either unable or unwilling to advance further towards the west and to try to take the fight closer to Gaddafi strongholds like Sirte and Tripoli. The pro-Gaddafi forces also seem unable or unwilling to do much more now, apart from scrap against the rebel forces over a few towns in the deserts to the west of Benghazi. Now, when you look at the rebel forces, they're a rather undisciplined, unorderly bunch. Some of them will freely admit to having no military experience as recently as a week ago. And the weaponry they're using is a combination of old Soviet anti-aircraft guns and also some newer weaponry. But they are very undisciplined. They just seem to be letting off ammunition at the moment, wasting ammunition with no particular purpose. Now, this uprising that began a couple of weeks ago with such power and energy does appear to be losing momentum. And if anything right now, it looks as though the pro-Gaddafi forces have the upper hand.
But in the city where the uprising began, there was more defiance on Friday. Religious leaders in Benghazi called for the people there to keep up the fight. Tony Bertley reports.
Neither the weather nor Gaddafi's threats could stop them massing in the centre of Benghazi for Friday prayers. Tens of thousands gathered in defiance of their hated leader and in support of those still under government control in Tripoli. In the city where the uprising began, the cleric called for Gaddafi to step down, the people to stand up, and those with guns to come forward and fight for the liberation of the capital. These people remain resolute and determined, but that alone is not enough. They need something more. If anything, Gaddafi seems stronger and bolder than he was at the beginning. So the question is, what next? And what if the Libyan leader refuses to go? Will this civil uprising turn into a civil war? Many say that won't happen, but international rhetoric has increased, direct pressure has slowed. Some feel the momentum of the uprising has slowed with it.
Gaddafi is in hiding. He is not representing anybody any longer. He is a coward and he won't challenge the people, and it is only a matter of time.
People here know Gaddafi has weathered international storms and sanctions before, most notably after the downing of Pan Am 103 more than 20 years ago, and there are still real concerns in free Libya.
We need to think of the life of the Libyans first as a priority, so we are asking for the help of the international community under the UN flag.
From the streets, though, there are no doubts. Those in Benghazi seem totally committed to the fight, wherever it may lead.
Let him drop bombs on us. We're not afraid of anything. We're not even afraid of his mercenaries.
Gaddafi has used that aerial threat a number of times in the last few days, and control of the skies is essential to complete liberation.
We know that this guy will commit a massacre in Tripoli today, and if the international community doesn't move, then it will be on their conscience.
Another victim of the rebellion is paraded through the streets of the city. It's almost a daily occurrence. The pain is still being felt here. Ahmed Sati was a 51-year-old civil servant who has just died from a bullet wound sustained during the demonstrations. His children lost a loving father and a man who wanted democracy. Even though Gaddafi is still in power, they don't feel his death was in vain.
My father did not die for nothing. He and the rest died for our beloved country.
With the death toll now said to have surpassed 1,000, the heart of the revolution is suffering. And throughout Libya today, there is still uncertainty, there is still anger, and there is still death. Tony Bertley, AlJazeera, Benghazi.
U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has condemned the killing of at least 6 female protesters in Côte d'Ivoire. They were taking part in a demonstration calling for President Laurent